Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a guest episode and I have Garrett Creary on the podcast. If you're not familiar with him, he is a functional health coach who's located in the Arizona area. And in this episode, we discuss his transformation story. So he reached a peak 400 pounds in his late teens. So we talk about really that journey getting to there and then what it looked like from there. He also had gastric bypass surgery. So we talk about what that process was like. We discuss things that he did post surgery, how it impacted his ability to keep weight off, what that process looked like. We talk about how after that transition, how it ended up actually causing him to tank his hormones. So we talk about that, some things that he would do differently. And then we also throughout talk about coaching clients, what this looks like, how we can apply his weight loss journey to clients. And then we do also discuss his recent gut protocol that he had and some things that he's working on there. And then we also talk about his current training as well too. So a ton of great insight into this. I think that hearing about Garrett's story is super inspirational. And then again, some challenges that he went through, right? Because a lot of people think it's just straight, hey, you lose a bunch of weight, you're good to go. But there's a lot of issues that can arise from that. And especially with gastric bypass surgery as well too. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you haven't yet, make sure you give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have any questions, you can ask around this podcast or anything like that. You can ask them there. And then if you found this podcast be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode with Garrett. Garrett, thanks for coming on to the show, man. Super excited to chat with you. Garrett and I, we met up at Sam Miller's live event that he had. I think it was back in October. We were in the same group and we got to chat a little bit there and meet up with you, man. That's always a cool thing with those events. I feel is you always meet at least a couple of people that you end up connecting on Instagram or social media, getting on a podcast, and then you stay connected. And that's like somebody that you know in the industry and you guys stay in touch and everything like that. So I love going to those events for that reason. But Garrett, you probably have me beat in terms of how long you've been in F and MS. I think you had me, I think you were one of the ones that were like up there for, I think I started in like 2021-ish, late 2021, early 2022. How long have you were a little bit before me, I think, weren't you?
What's really funny is I love Sam, and I'm going to call him out on this one if he actually ends up listening to this. Is like
We'll have to make them.
he has an elephant brain. I'll give him mad credit. Sam's brain is wild, like what he can remember.
Yeah.
But I think he has my start date almost a year after. Almost positive that I joined like it was November of 2021 because like I remember going through the course material like leading into like early spring and summer of 2022
Yeah.
because I remember when I joined the program, I was still living in one place and then like January of that year I moved. And so it's really like a distinct timeline. And he's just like convinced that I joined in like late 2022, which is fine. Like whatever. But yeah, I've been in the program now for this fall. It'll be how many ever years that is from November of 2021.
Is that first? I didn't even say thanks for coming on the show, man. I'm like I said,
Yeah.
super excited to chat with you. Appreciate you taking time out to do this. Was that kind of when you said you moved from Minnesota to Arizona?
No,
Timeframe?
so funny enough, I actually moved from Minnesota, North Dakota out to Arizona Labor Day weekend of 2019, so 5 months before the world shut down.
Oh,
And I started working for True Food Kitchen and I had seen a couple pieces of content from Sam, listened to a couple episodes, and all of a sudden I was walking through the restaurant late one night on like a Friday or a Saturday, and Sam was out to eat. And I was like, hey, like you're Sam, that podcast guy.
that's
I
hilarious.
was like one of the first people to ever recognize him in public. And yeah, so I actually posted on my stories the other day, like a collage of me and Sam pics. And one of the first ones, if you notice, is like baby me and baby Sam back in 2019. Super, super funny. Yeah, I recognized him out in public, and it was, yeah, basically 2 years later. It was like 18 months later, Sarah Fector had joined FNMS, and me and Sarah had, up until COVID, traveled. We met at a seminar, and then we ended up just like traveling for a lot of seminars together. We first met, I think it was in Wisconsin. So me and Sarah met in Wisconsin at Eugene Teo and Mountain Dogs like seminar in
Mm.
Wisconsin. And then we met there and then we had joined Muscle Nerds. We went out to our first conference, like with Muscle Nerds, was in Georgia, and then DC, and then California. We did, we didn't do Kilo together, but yeah, we travel for a lot of like seminars together. And she was the one who joined FNMS, and she's like, Garrett, like this ties everything together. Like this is that kind of like missing piece of the puzzle that really allows us to apply it to our clients. And yeah, so then
Is
that influenced and caused me to join.
is that sort of, and again, we're going to dive into your journey. You have a super cool journey from like a fitness and health perspective, but is that sort of, was that the thing that kind of got you into the more kind of functional space, or was that something that you already had looked at before getting into Sam's and that was just everything that put it all together?
I think it was just so going back to the start of my career. So I got my personal, like I've wrapped up my personal training certification in January of 2016 and started my business in February of 2016. And 5 months before that, I was actually the previous summer before that, I was supposed to move to Australia. I was going to move
Mm,
to Australia for a year. And at the time, I couldn't get out of my truck lease. So it was basically either pay my lease payment while I was in Australia, not using the vehicle, or cough up 12 grand to just pay it off before I left. And when you're 25, 26 years old and broke and starting a business,
it's a
that
lot of
really
money.
it's a lot of money. And so I decided to stay home. I didn't leave. And that's when I came back to, I had moved out to Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, which is like a small lake town, 45 minutes from where I grew up, and moved out there, was living with my dad, enjoying the summer. And then I was supposed to go out to Australia, didn't go, moved back to my hometown, started my business. And there was like a seminar that was being put on. And that's actually where I met Adam Bisick and then Derek Dolchner, who's now my coach. He owns a gym with his business partner in Minnesota called Iron Alliance. And then they have, so Minnesota State is one of their shows that they put on. And I met Derek and it was really funny as Derek's a great dude. And he was like, your back development for as long as you've been training is pathetic.
Tell you how it
Uh,
is.
he told me how it was. And I followed him on socials. And that was, I think, when socials were a little bit different back then.
Oh,
Obviously, like
yeah.
it just changes at just such a dramatic rate. And I saw him starting to get continuing education. And I'm like, and I looked up to all those guys that I met at the seminar. I was like, just all of what they knew at the time. And I was like, okay, obviously, like I need to know things deeper. Like this isn't just sets and reps and time under tension to really help people. And so he started getting education from Muscle Nerds. And I saw him at a conference like in Denver with Luke and the Muscle Nerds crew. And then I was like, okay, I need to do this. And that's when I started looking into and investing in Muscle Nerds. And I invested, they had a lot of like online courses similar to FNMS at the time. And then as you get plugged into that space, you start to see these educators. And that's when I found like Eugene and Mountain Dog and went out to Wisconsin because that was closest, went and saw them. I already knew that I was doing Muscle Nerds. They had a live seminar in Georgia, and that was shortly thereafter. And that's what kind of sparked it, right? A lot of the understanding physiology and blood pressure and why do these things all matter and how do we as coaches be the front line and manipulate these variables to genuinely help people from like a root cause standpoint and a lifestyle standpoint. And then FNMS just really tied it together. And obviously, I've been with them ever since. I've been an alumni member for coming up on 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is now.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Luke's stuff is great. Luke does a really good job of from Muscle Nerds. Like you said, he's really good on like the exercise physiology standpoint, but he does do a good job of kind of tying all that together as well too. Yeah, Luke does a great job with that. Cool, man. That's awesome. So again, what I want to also chat with you about is your own health and fitness journey, right? Because I feel like it probably ties a lot of this stuff together for you in terms of what got you into this and everything like that. So if you can, man, just give a brief background on your just the big transformation that you had, and then we can dive into some things around that. I'm sure I'll have some questions around it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest in a morbidly obese family, right? And you're from St. Louis, so I'm sure it's a lot of the same. In the Midwest, like pretty much any occasion you can possibly imagine is an excuse to eat.
Yep.
You're angry, eat. Sad, eat. Birthday, eat. You got a bunch of A's on your report card, eat. Like it's that's just the Midwest and a lot of what we grew up on in the Midwest. It's funny, a lot of the trend right now is, Mom, what was the 90s? Blah, blah, blah. And I remember growing up, like a lot of times it was mac and cheese and hot dogs and hamburger helper and spaghetti with a single pound of beef for a family of four with 2 pounds of pasta. So it's, yeah, that's just how we grew up. I would say, honestly, as much as we were morbidly obese, I would say my parents did better than most. Like, my dad was a big guy on like veggies. Hey, you got to have veggies with dinner. This is just important. And other things like that. It was just portion control, movement, things along those lines. And yeah, I think that if we look back across timelines, like late 80s into the 90s, as a general whole, we were starting to get into this technology place and people weren't moving as much. And then, especially living in the Midwest, where I'm from, if you know anything about it, like Fargo, North Dakota, Moorhead, Minnesota, like where I grew up, frequently is anywhere between 10 to 15 degrees colder than like Minneapolis. Like in a matter of just 3 hours, like it is wildly different on a temperature perspective. And like Fargo is in the Red River Valley. It's the bottom of what used to be Lake Agassiz, which Lake Agassiz was the size of all four of the Great Lakes combined. And so it's very flat and it gets very windy. So it's, I remember the winter I left, it was school is canceled 6 times. And as in the Midwest, school doesn't get canceled for a whole lot of anything. Like it doesn't matter if it's snowing. It was canceled 6 times, and three of which it was 45 below zero air temperature, not even including chill. So it's pretty brutal back home.
Just as you're saying that, it's okay. Not only is there just from a food perspective, but then you start talking about the weather like that and stuff like that. Man, there probably was a bunch of circadian disruption as well too. You're not freaking getting any light. You're not getting outside. You're not exercising. It's man, you could just see how that starts to add up too.
Living in Arizona now is so weird because like summertime back home in Minnesota, like it will be light by 5:30 a.m. and it will not get dark until 10:15 in the middle of summer. But then the winter is the complete opposite. I was home from December, like mid-December to mid-January 2023 into 2024 for a month because I hadn't really been home for Christmas in 5 years and forgot it does not get like light until 8:15 a.m. and it will be dark by 5. Like it's wild. Whereas like here in Arizona, even in the dead of winter, it's still like light by 7 and similar like sundown time. So you get like at least an extra hour. It's just, yeah, it's way up in that northern hemisphere, like way, way up there. It's very different.
And you can get outside in the winters. Well, you can get outside at any point, but it's easy to say that, except when it's freaking minus 45 degrees. It's a little bit tougher to get outside
For sure.
than when you're in that situation there. So cool, man. Yeah. So like you were kind of saying, again, grew up in the Midwest, and so food was just something that you guys always had. I'm just looking at your Instagram post here. I don't know the exact number, but you have up to 390 pounds. Was that your highest, or did you get higher than that? And like maybe sum up what the time frame of that and age and stuff like that when you got to that 390.
Yeah, I walked into high school. I weighed in for football tryouts at 300 plus pounds my freshman year. So 14 years
Yeah.
old. Definitely struggled with my weight and eating my feelings, etc. And then the highest I ever saw on a scale, I believe, was like 395 pounds. Knowing now what I know about health and fitness and food, there had to have been a time I tipped the scales at 400 a
Yeah.
few times. Never once did I actually weigh myself, nor did I care to. Like at that, when you're getting that heavy, you actually have to have a special scale. Fun fact, there's not just, especially 17 years ago, they didn't produce scales that were weighing 400-pound people for your bathroom floor unless you bought it special.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there was times that I tipped the scales at 400. When I went in for gastric bypass at the age of 19, I was 382 pounds. And the funny thing is like I said earlier, is like throughout high school and stuff, like I played football, right? All throughout high school, except for my senior year. Just didn't get along with the coaches and just didn't want to play my senior year, just didn't see a point in it. But I played football all throughout high school. And then I actually graduated high school a semester early and took back control of my health. Was working with a personal trainer, was like lifting weights for the thought process of losing weight, getting healthy, eating a healthy, more nutrient dense diet. And I actually dropped 60 pounds naturally. So I graduated a semester early. I was tipping the scales right around 360 pounds, dropped 60, 70 pounds. I was like 290 at graduation, in the 290s at graduation, walking with my class and things like that. And then my car took a crap midsummer that year. A bunch of bills had piled up and my housing. So I was accepted to the University of Nebraska. I was supposed to go to school for dental, and my housing got pulled out from underneath my feet. Like I had a lined up free housing essentially, and got pulled out from underneath my feet. My car broke down, and I took it as a sign of, okay, hold on, we need to take a pause because like my tuition went from 13,000 to $27,000 like overnight with housing for out of state and all that. And so they took a momentary pause. And then unfortunately, 6 months later, we lost my mom. So I lost my mom at 18 and a half years old. And it really changed the trajectory of my life at that time dramatically. It was brutal. And that was when that all happened, like when that all transpired, when my car broke down, couldn't go to school. I stopped working with my personal trainer at the time, and I had gained back like 20 pounds, right? So like I didn't go full swing. I was still managing some better life habits, etc. But I had gained back 20 or so pounds. I was like 310 or so. And then when my mom passed away, it was full, just no holds barred, right? Eating feelings. I remember at the time, so I worked for US Bank for 5 years, like right out of high school, got that career job. And I'd go to, a lot of times I'd stop at McDonald's on the way to work. I'd grab two McGriddles, two hash browns, and a large OJ. Frequently stop at Little Caesars. Mind you, if you know anything about like corporate America world, like you get a 30-minute lunch break in 30 minutes. It's not 35, it's not 40, it's 30 minutes. If you're not locked back in your computer, you're going to be getting some negative performance reviews. And I would run across the street, grab a large Little Caesars, some crazy bread, and a 2 liter of soda. And I would eat almost all of it and half the 2 liter and go back to work. And then a lot of times back then, like just eating how I grew up, right? Like pasta for dinner a lot of times, hamburger helper, shrimp scampi recipes with all of the butter and oil and cream.
Yeah.
Just my dad was actually a chef
Cool.
for many years, trained in like French cuisine. So I'm actually a really good cook. And so it was easy to overindulge a lot. And that's just how it unraveled. And man, how old was I? It would have been so that happened, that transpired for about a year. And that's when I gained 70, 80, 90 pounds,
Back up to 380.
right? 380, 390, maybe pushing the bill at 400 at one point. I'd never actually drank in high school, but then after high school is when I started boozing with friends. And back in the Midwest, like it's blackout or backout. Like you don't just have a couple, and especially at 19 years old, it's you drink until you're sick. And so it was just, yeah, a combination of all of that, and gained all that weight. And then by December 17th of 2009 is when I had surgery.
Okay. So with that real quick, let me just, so again, you dropped down to 290 and then obviously you had a bunch of stuff happen. That's terrible to hear about your mom, man. I can't imagine what that's like. And then just all that stuff piles up. And I feel like at that point too, and I'd be curious to hear what you went through, but how so you get up to 400 initially, you get back down. Like what was did you feel that pull to get back to say 400? Like obviously you had these things happen that made it, but was it like instant of once this started happening and you started getting back to maybe your previous habits? Did it come on pretty quickly? And I guess maybe describe what that kind of situation was like there, if that makes sense what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. I think at that point, about before the call, is Muscle Nerds and Luke Lehman. And if you ever take their nutrition course, Luke talks about me like in the nutrition course a little bit. And he talks about a lot of their nutrition course, they talk about identity. And when it comes to nutrition and stuff like that, it really does come down to identity. And at that point, I losing 60, 70 pounds wasn't enough at that point to change my identity. I did
Mm.
not build those skill sets at that point, right? Like I was just following directions. I wasn't truly changing my identity at that point. I was just following directions, doing what I was told. These things weren't natural to me. I hadn't built the lifestyle habits, etc. I just didn't understand it. I didn't at the time, like the coach that I was working with, it wasn't tracking your macros. It was just like, hey, dude, eat more protein, eat more veggies, eat a little bit less of this, move your body, strength train. And at 19 years old, your body, or 18, your body's pretty responsive and those things work pretty well. So it was just, yeah, it was slipping back into those old habits combined with the freedom of being an adult, of being able to, I'm making money. I can go to McDonald's. I'm making money. I can go to Little Caesars at lunch. I'm making money completely being on your own. So it's just so much was going on at that time. It was working a career job. It was, I went back to college when I was 19. It was all of these different variables that were going on at the same time and just falling into a lot of the traps that we see with society and culture of eating out is more convenient and all of this stuff. And it's just easy to get carried away. I recently actually had a very comprehensive genetics test. And if you look at my genetics, like we know that epigenetics is what pulls the gun, right? Our habits, our identities. And it makes sense. Like looking back, I have poor methylation issues. I don't, genetically speaking, I don't manage carbohydrates well. So like you take all of that into consideration. I don't detox. You take all that into consideration and then you just throw a bunch of like fast food on it at think about that. Two McGriddles, two hash browns, and a large
I
OJ.
probably didn't even feel it either. You're like, oh, I probably eat a little bit more too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And same thing, like I could smash a large pizza, five crazy breads, and a half a 2 liter of soda in 20 minutes flat, like no problem.
Yeah.
And just didn't think anything about it. It was just, it was a normal day. And then by 2, 3 o'clock, I would have a candy bar and a bag of cookies and another soda from the vending machine. And when you're eating that way, when you're, especially when you're eating emotions and stuff like that, and there's just nowhere for them to go, yeah, it stacks on fast. It really does. And it just compounds.
Yeah, man, that's right. Yeah, all that stuff adds. And then when we talk about the circadian rhythm stuff, that probably there's just so many different things at play there. I guess since you were in that situation, can you kind of speak then on a lot of people will be like, oh, hey, you just have to eat less, right? And it's a willpower thing. But can you maybe hit on, and this maybe can tie into we don't need to hit on GLP-1s, but how that does play on like appetite suppression and stuff like that. Was that something that, as you start to gain more weight, things like that, do you see some dysregulation in terms of appetite and it just doesn't make like, you could just tell that it's harder to manage, you don't really feel full? Is that something that you experience and stuff like that too when you're at that?
Yeah, over the years of my career, as I've learned more and more about that stuff, like as far as how being morbidly obese like impacts those hunger hormones, 100%, right? Because something that I've experienced in coaching in my coaching career, I currently have a client. He's down 116 pounds from 415. We
Awesome.
just cracked we're in the 200s. And I remember when I gave him his first macro schedule and started to explain, okay, like here's how we need to fill these things, here's how we do this. You can still have some of these things, but it needs to fit within this realm. And as I started to give him like his yogurt bowl, like that we created as a staple in a recipe, and this, that, and the other thing, when he first started at around like 27, 28, 2,900 calories, he's Garrett, how do I eat this much food? He couldn't eat that much food. And I think that speaks to what you're trying to get at from back then is when you're eating highly palatable food, because if you actually really sit down and you look at two McGriddles, two hash browns, and a large OJ, that's not that much food volume. It really isn't. It's not that big of a meal versus right now on a day-to-day basis, and this is something that I've been eating for well over 10 years, as I'm walking out of a gut protocol and stuff like right now, like I eat a 6 egg omelet with four chicken sausages and 200 grams of mushrooms, 200 grams of fruit, and my coffee. And that's way, like volume wise, way more food than two McGriddles, two hash browns, and a large OJ. But like you look at the caloric difference, and I'm sure it's night and day, like the amount, just the sheer amount of fat that is in those two McGriddles and those hash browns because of the way that they're cooked. So 100%, it is you, the satiety cueing just isn't there because I would eat that for breakfast. A lot of times on my 15-minute break, 2 hours into my shift, so 3 hours later, I would go have a candy bar and a soda. And then I would have my Little Caesars lunch. Then I would have another candy bar and a bag of cookies or chips or whatever and a soda. Go home and have a pound of pasta, half a pound of beef, and probably have some dessert that evening. And it's just, and no, the thought of being full really isn't there. Like it would take, like when I was that big, for me to be truly full and like truly uncomfortable, it would have to be like at a holiday meal where it's like, you eat breakfast and then there's snacks sitting around that as a big guy, you just sit there and you graze the whole time. Then it's the next meal. And then you probably graze a little bit more. And by dinner, post dinner, you have a massive plate of food and you're like, oh my gosh, oh, like I ate too much. But then you still go back for dessert. Like you just let it settle for 30 minutes and you go back for dessert. That would probably be some of the only times that like I would really truly reach that like just obscene fullness.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a combination, right? It's like, okay, probably in that situation, the food choices you're making obviously are way more highly palatable. So it's like already right there, there's going to be some appetite dysregulation from that. You're not going to feel full. You're going to just pack on the calories just from that. And you probably don't even feel like you're eating a ton of food either on top of it, especially you start to throw in, like you said, some things like bags of chips and stuff like that. But it sounds like too there is a little bit of some appetite dysregulation outside of that on top. So it's like you combine that and then it's just boom, it's just a recipe for overconsumption of calories and a tough thing to manage over time there.
Yeah, lack of fiber, lack of consistency with protein to a degree, although I very much so grew up in a meat and potatoes family. That was another thing. Like growing up, again, portion control. My mom's favorite cut of steak growing up was ribeyes. And we would very consistently as a kid, right? 13, 14, 15 years old, I was eating 16-ounce ribeyes. And I might go back for seconds of another 4 or 5 ounces. So eating 20 ounces of ribeye at a meal with potatoes and veggies.
And ribeye is usually like a fattier cut of meat, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So again, it's like you were getting protein in, but you also just from a calorie standpoint, it's like when clients are kind of like, oh, hey, I'm getting in protein. And it's again, it's like pork or like a fattier meat, right? It's like, yeah, you're getting protein in, but you're also packing on a lot of extra calories with that as well,
Yeah.
too.
I remember there was actually funny as Luke told me this story. It was either his one of his clients or a client of a client of one of the coaches that they coached. This guy was like supposed to be in a deficit and he wasn't losing weight. And they like he was meticulous. Like this guy was very type A, very rigid, tracking everything, but he did not understand the difference in like levels of leanness of beef. This dude was eating like 3 pounds of Wagyu beef like daily.
Damn.
Could not figure it out.
Yeah.
And it was like 60 days in, they finally were like, it just popped into his head. He's, wait a minute, what kind of beef have you been eating? He's like, oh, it's this Wagyu. It tastes, it's like, yeah, dude, like wildly fatty. It tastes amazing, but
Yeah, that just goes to show again. It's, man, it's easy for those, like you don't, in those situations, whether you go out to eat or whatever it is, it's like you don't really necessarily feel like you're eating more, but you're getting a lot of calories for the amount of food. And that goes back to the food volume thing you said. Now you switch to, like you said, a 6 egg omelet, chicken sausage, mushrooms. It's like your food volume is completely different there. But I guess during this time frame before we go into your gastric bypass, like what did, even when you got down to 290 and then once you were at 290, like we talked about, you did have obviously circumstances that I'm sure that played a role in it, but did you find that hunger was higher during that time too? Did you notice like extra amount of hunger or not?
I think that's the thing. Like, I think if that's anything that I've been able to teach clients over the years is like when you start eating like whole nutrient dense foods and stuff like that, especially when you're coming from an extreme, to just reference my client again, like he's finally reached a point, right? We're in the 290s and I've finally pulled enough food away from him where he's, oh man, like my hunger is definitely there. The cravings are there. And I really set a framework for him yesterday. I was like, all right, here's the plan. We're going to diet. We're going to finally quote unquote diet for the next 12 to 14 weeks. I want to frame this for you. July 1 is our cutoff. Then we're going to increase food towards maintenance calories, give you a little bit of mental reprieve, give you a little bit of food freedom back. But like in the meantime, like he even said, yeah, it's been really hard for me to stay under my carbohydrates. Like a lot of the snacks that I used to like, where like he really loves grapes. Like grapes just are his fruit and his jam. And as we know, if you look at the macronutrients of like grapes versus strawberries, grapes versus blueberries, like grapes tend to be a little bit higher in sugars and carbs. And I told him like, hey man, like, all right, like the next 14 weeks or whatever it is, I need you to lock in. I need us to make a little bit different choices. I need to eat a little bit more veggies to keep you as full and satiated as possible. And then we can step back and using that as a full circle back to my journey back then, not having near the knowledge I have today is looking back, like I was just consistently eating lean proteins, consistently eating more fruit, more veggies, less pasta, etc. And that kept me pretty full and satiated. And I was just, especially when you're that big, when you're that morbidly obese, making 10 to 15% better food choices, you'd be amazed. Like when you're that big and moving more in strength training, you can drop 60, 70 pounds. Like David, when we first started, he dropped 70 pounds in 4 months.
Yeah.
70 pounds in 4 months.
Yeah.
And it's taken us almost a year to get the other 46 pounds off, right? So think about that time window, right? 70 pounds in 4 months to all of a sudden now it's chipping away 46 pounds over the course of 12 months.
Which is
So
still good.
still great, right? Still amazing. But it's like I think that's where a lot of people, especially those who are morbidly obese, like they don't realize, like, if you make 10, 15, 20% better decisions in the initial go while still like keeping some of the cookies and the whatever in your nutrition, you can make it a long way. And then slowly but surely, like that's where it's really is instilling this identity change of
Yeah.
over the course of time, it's all right. I eat less of this. I don't order pizza as much. I'm feeling better. Oh, like I move my body more. It's slowly chipping away at that identity. Yeah, to your point, no, in such a short window of time, I lost a lot of weight really quickly with probably making somewhere around 15 to 20% better choices. Like by no means did I never have pasta, did I never have cookies or sweets, etc. But I was trending in the right direction. I was moving my body more. I was strength training. I was building an aerobic base, which makes our mitochondria healthier, which allows us to process things better.
Yeah, again, it comes back to like you said, the identity shift, and having the habits in place. Like that's really going to help keep you down. And when you get those dialed in, it's like you may not find that push to be as high. I'm just always curious if someone does say they're in your situation where you're up to 400 pounds and now you're sitting at 200 ish. If you were to compare someone who came from 400 down to 200 versus someone that's always been around 200, I just always wonder if there's a little bit of a, again, we're saying their lifestyle's the same at this point in time, right? Is there a little bit more of a drive to consume more food and come back up in that person? And again, that's a loaded question. And there's probably a lot of things, but I just didn't know if that's something that you experience.
I think for sure, but so I guess really I think the thing that I'm trying to hit home and give the audience is this is I think in the initial, let's just call it for an even number, that first 100 pounds, like when you're a man who's 400, you have a lot more wiggle room in that first 100 pounds than you do the next 50. And what I mean by that is, were those food cravings there? Did I still overindulge and grab a candy bar like almost every time I was at the grocery store or have pasta? But the thing is, like, when you take let's just call it a meal plan, right? McDonald's, candy, pizza, candy, 2 pounds of pasta, and all of a sudden you remove the candy every day and cut it down, and now it's 2 times a week. If you calculate that out, like that's a
Makes a big difference.
deficit, right? It makes a difference. So was the food noise and stuff still there? 100%. But net, I was making better choices.
Yeah.
So my body was responding with losing weight because I was still in a caloric deficit. Was it quote unquote optimal? No, probably not. But I think one of the biggest things that morbidly obese people get in trouble with is first and foremost is they'll try to slash calories. Like they don't realize that they're probably averaging 5 to let's just say 7,000 calories on a day-to-day basis. That's what's gotten them to where they are. Now, when we look at like math and thermodynamics, you would think that person would be 600 pounds, and that doesn't make sense. But then when we really dive deep into the physiology, we really have to think is, okay, we're not necessarily what we eat, we are what we break down and process. And when you're constantly shoving that much crap in your face all the time, like how much of that are you actually breaking down? How much are you digesting? How much
Yeah.
are you absorbing? And how much is just getting like your body's get rid of this? And so I think that like factors in. So I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make is when they're morbidly obese is they're like, well, they'll go from say 5 to 7,000 calories straight to 2,000 calories on a hope and a prayer. And when they're not perfect and they have the quote unquote slip up, the candy bar or the cookie, or they have birthday cake at a family outing, or they have a couple slices of pizza, rather than dusting themselves off, getting up and just getting right back on track to like what has been working, they chuck it in the fuck it bucket and they go right back to the habits that got them where they were. Thankfully, back then, I didn't have such an emotional attachment. This was really my first real attempt at dieting. I was just like, slowly but surely chipping away at my identity, making better choices. I was eating lean proteins. I was eating more veggies. I was eating less candy bars. I was eating less pizza. I was eating less McDonald's. And because of those choices, my body was responding in a positive way very rapidly because net I was in a deficit comparatively speaking to where I was before.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Like you said, you have a little bit more wiggle room, like you said there, just because again, your body weight so high, you're probably energy expenditure is probably a little bit higher than what people would probably think, just because again, you are just carrying around more mass and everything like that. You're eating a lot of food. So and again, maybe it's not great food, but it's your thermic effect of food's probably a little bit higher as well too there. All right, let's dive into, I'm curious. So then you did gastric bypass. So like that happened, maybe explain to the audience what that situation looked like and maybe the first couple months after that, what that process kind of looked like for you.
Yeah. Gastric bypass, I think we're going to talk a little bit about GLP-1s. And I've said this before is like, I wish they existed back then. I wouldn't wish what I've been through with my gastric bypass on my worst enemy. Fortunately, for those who maybe have had the surgery or had a loved one had it, I never really got a lot of the negative side effects as far as a lot of people with gastric will know like about like food getting stuck. I very rarely experience that. And now, 17 years post-op, like I really don't ever experience it ever. But a lot of people, when they first had surgery, like a lot of times, like their pouch was made too small or food would get regularly stuck. I never experienced a lot of that initially. What I did end up experiencing is by the age of 25, like my hormones completely crashed out. Low testosterone, looking back, knowing what I know today, realistically, I was probably hypothyroid back then. And you were talking about earlier is like the current GI protocols that I've been through, like realistically, if I didn't develop my GI issues all the way back at gastric bypass, I've had them for well over a decade, and I've actually been relatively asymptomatic. The way my symptoms have process have like really made me rethink like how we think about GI health. Because yeah, I was pretty asymptomatic for the most part for a good part of a decade. It would never lead you to believe that I have GI issues, but I've really peeled back the layers of my GI health and I'm feeling the best I have in well over 10 years. It negatively impacted me substantially. And so with the invention of I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Like you said, someone who's been 179, 190, 200 pounds their whole life, never been morbidly obese, maybe been 20, 30 pounds overweight, is I don't think a lot of people understand like how messed up your hormones really are, how much like how hard it is to truly get started. Because a lot of times when you first get started, it is very the example I gave, people try to slash to 2000, and when they can't stick to 2000 and things start to crumble and they slip up and they just want to chuck it in the fuck it bucket, like that's the hardest thing to get over. And so for me, when I had gastric, that's really like I woke up with because my whole family, like that was the only people who had success at weight loss was gastric bypass. And so my perception of the world at the time and what was possible, it was like when you're this big, this is the only way out.
Yeah.
And I woke up with this like faith and hope of, okay, I have the tool now. I'm all in. Like I know annoyed the ever living crap out of my clinic that I had my surgery at. Like, when can I lift? When can I let me go? And I followed like post-op protocols to a T, did my steps, did my movement, hit my protein. I got into the gym as soon as they allowed me to and got cranking. And I dropped 160 pounds in 14 months. And that helped change my identity a lot. But there was still so much left to be desired when it came to that process because of just the way Western medicine handles things and the lack of like nutritional guidance, the lack of like exercise guidance, the lack of, hey, this is a tool in the toolbox. Like, we got to shift your identity along the way. And I'll be honest, like, that's something even still 17 years in, like, I still struggle with some of those identity pieces. There's still sometimes that I'll catch myself slipping in like eating my feelings or like slipping in even a couple weeks back as I was like wrapping up my GI protocol, like I was in a really rough spot, like mentally, especially being post show, having to basically walk into another gut protocol and continue to peel back the layers. And because of how intense my gut protocol was, like I was carrying 10, 12, 15 pounds of inflammation. It was all in my midsection, all water. I didn't recognize myself most days. Like I could not go off of my nutrition plan like at all, or I would be inflamed, watery, look like a bag of milk, like just, especially coming post show, like that was very mentally taxing. I wish that GLP-1s existed back when. And I think if we use them the appropriate way, if we look at it in the appropriate way as a tool in the toolbox, especially for morbidly obese people, to bridge that gap, to quiet the noise and have a plan and a framework of, hey, this is a tool to quiet the noise. Let's build the identity. Let's build the habits. Let's make you feel really amazing. And then as we slowly titrate you off and walk you off this medication, feed you up to maintenance calories, etc. Like you can build muscle, you can be healthier. Like it's not as a permanent intervention as surgery. And it just, yeah, I wish they existed because they truly are a miracle when used well and used as a tool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I agree. I think for all the things we've already hit on, like it definitely just from the food noise type situation, right? It's like it's a tool to help lower that, especially when there probably is some of that dysregulation going on from an appetite standpoint. But as you said, using it smartly, and I think that's probably where I'm sure you would agree, that's probably where the biggest mistake is made with them is obviously what people are doing in the process. Like you said, also changing the identity, like that's super important as well too. For your situation, so I guess a good kind of where I want to go with this is you mentioned you got basically right after you got the surgery, you were like, all right, I'm ready to go. You're obviously doing the thing, right? Were because I feel like some people maybe right off the bat they do that, but they probably fade once they're like, oh crap, I still have to like do things, do the damn thing after this. So you hit the ground running with that loss, 160 pounds. So I'm assuming you got into the 200s or around there. I think my math is right on that. And then you said you like mid 20s, your thyroid was super low, testosterone was tanked. Was that do you attribute that to the surgery? Do you attribute that to what you did post surgery, or like where did that kind of, or is there? I'm sure there's other things as well too, but I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Perfect storm. 24 months after I had surgery, lost 160 pounds, gaining more and more confidence in myself. Started working in the bar industry. I was, like I told you, I was a quote unquote career man out of high school, walked in, worked at US Bank, and I spent 5 years there working a career job. But I was making like $850 like every 2 weeks at this career job. And I was broke. I was like, between everything, I was like, how do people afford to live? This is obnoxious. What do we do with this? And I started working in the bar industry. I started working in the bar industry, and there was a stint from probably 21 to 24. I was working 70, 80, 90-hour weeks for 3 to 4 years straight. And every night that I was not working, I was boozing. And in the Midwest, like I said, it's blackout or back out. It's not go out and have 2 beers with dinner and go home. It's go out, have 2 beers with dinner and then go out and party. Or pregame before you go to the bar, right? Like you drink a half a bottle before you even get to the bar. And so it was just, yeah, it was the perfect storm. It was trying to diet all the time, right? Trying to hone in my physique, training 5 to 6 days a week, partying and boozing 3 to 4 days a week, and working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. I remember one of the bars that I worked at, I was required to bartend Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. My work schedule during the day, I worked 7 to 3:30, and I worked on an every other rotating schedule. So a lot of times what would end up happening is I would work 13-day stretches with a Sunday off, and I did that for almost 2 years, where I would work 13 days in a row, one singular day off, and then just rinse, wash, and repeat. Yeah, it was the perfect storm of everything. It was the drinking, the absolutely dumpster fire of a sleep schedule for 5 years, all of it. Just perfect combination to just trash my internal health on top of not absorbing nutrients well from having gastric bypass. And then, like when I was 25, I kind of like to say is that was all I was building this big haystack. And at 25, I got into a really toxic relationship, and that was the match. It just like I had built the haystack, and that was the final thing, chuck the match on top of the hay bale, and it just nuked everything. Like I can remember that year pretty vividly, and like how my health really took a downturn. And what's crazy about like hormonal health and internal health is I can identify where it happened, but it's such a slow thing. Like it just starts to show up. And all of a sudden, it's just like your new norm. Like you wake up, you go to bed, and that's the crazy thing is like throughout that whole journey of like my struggle with health over the last decade is I could go to bed and sleep 8, 9 hours, but my quality was terrible. Like when I finally got like when I got an Aura ring like 4 or 5 years ago, like I would average 20 to 30 minutes of deep sleep, and I'd be willing to bet I probably averaged 20 to 30 minutes of deep sleep for a decade.
Yeah.
So no real restorative sleep, no real regenerative sleep. I could go to bed and sleep, but the quality was just terrible.
Also, if you're working, like you said, in the bar industry and stuff like that, again, I hit on this earlier, but the circadian rhythm side of things too, right? Like I'm sure that was, and that probably played into the quality of sleep, but then has downstream impacts, I feel like, of everything that you're talking about. Like you said, it was a perfect storm, though. It wasn't just one thing, it was all those things, right? And I'm sure you probably see that, right? Like somebody gets into health and fitness, they, whether it be in your situation, they push it, drop some weight, they get lean, and then they think that's how they need to live all the time. And then that's where, like you said, you built a haystack, and then certain things happen, things like the match, and boom, it's like you said, things start to crumble down there if you're not also taking care of your internal health. So I guess then for you, was it just, I mean, looking back, did that kind of become your new normal of like how you felt? Because I feel like there's probably, and maybe you see this too, a lot of people end up, it becomes their normal, right? And that's just how they feel. And they don't really realize that there's a lot of things that they can work on. Was that kind of your situation there? Or was yours different to where you did feel, hey, something's not right here?
It was 4 or 5 years of like kind of denial of what's wrong with me, living in this state of just chronic fatigue, lack of joy, depression, anxiety, not understanding like what's the purpose, like why am I alive, like deep stuff, like not wanting to be alive anymore, like all of that stuff was very real, especially back in the Midwest. Big part of why I moved to Arizona. Like that last winter really did me in from a mental standpoint, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have no joy ever, and lots of guilt, lots of shame. Didn't feel like myself, and what I mean by that is just not wanting to spend time around my family, like always feeling like I was chronically behind, having this endless to-do list. But then when I would try to, especially knowing what I know about thyroid now, is like I had this brain that like wanted to do these things and you want to be a man and you want to do these. And then my body was just like, sit down, go lay on the couch, go doom scroll for 13 hours, go binge watch every show on Netflix from top to bottom. Nope, sit down. Have a nice day. You have zero energy to do anything. And I think initially at that point, it was just like, I was like, oh, this is just because again, it slowly creeps in. It's not dramatic and it just became like my normal of like how I was functioning. And it finally just came to a head when I was 29. I took a trip out here like spring, March of 2019, confirming, yep, I really want to move to Arizona. I was like, yep, got out here. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Moved out here. Obviously, my problems came with me. They didn't magically disappear, but it was a step in the right direction. Better sunlight, better lifestyle choices, different environment, and slowly but surely, like I chipped away. By November of the following year, 2020, is when social media ads started really becoming a thing. And I was getting ads for like low testosterone. And I was like, man, that sounds like me. I was like, holy, what is this? What is testosterone? What does all this mean? I have low testosterone and I like the symptoms, like all check the boxes. Sure enough, got labs, sat down with a doc. My testosterone was 265, right? Out of 70-year-old man. The problem is it was one of these fly-by-night clinics, just getting into the telehealth space, and they gave me my testosterone replacement and prescribed it and all that stuff. And of course, it was just a 200 milligram dose with an AI and call it a day. And for a moment, it made me feel a little bit better. But knowing now, again, what I know now is my thyroid was severely underperforming, not functioning well, wasn't processing nutrients well, a lot of issues. And it helped, but it actually almost made things worse because I had this high functioning testosterone brain, like the male brain, with a body that just kept telling me to sit down. You have no energy, dude. You can't do this. You don't have the energy. Sit down. Like something I never let go of in all of the 17 years is my training habit. Like I would say collectively, I've probably in 17 years missed maybe 8 months of training total, maybe. And it was something that was just ingrained in me. I'm like, I'm never letting this habit go, no matter how bad I feel. But so often back then, my training made me feel worse. Like I would
Mm.
train and then I would be smoked for the rest of
Damn.
the day. I had enough energy to train. And outside of that, like there was nothing. I was running on fumes.
And that was from your thyroid?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like the clinic was like, all right, hey, low testosterone, hey, HRT. But really, it sounds like if you were to go back, you would look at, all right, what's causing maybe like the low thyroid? And that's probably something that you would look at working on first. And then in turn, from my understanding, that will also potentially impact test. Like they have a role with each other as well, too, don't they? Thyroid
Oh,
and testosterone.
100%. Had in a perfect world, had I had someone like a clinician, had they looked at my GI health, had I started working on my GI health back then, had I had thyroid support to bridge the gap to give me the energy to do the things that are required for the GI health, I probably could have avoided thyroid replacement. I could have avoided TRT, all of it, because absolutely, like your thyroid plays a huge role downstream cascades to testosterone. And had I corrected the thyroid, it probably never would have needed TRT. But it's really funny is like one of the very first providers that I worked with that prescribed me my thyroid medication and learning what I learned, I was like, fuck, I could have probably avoided TRTs. You're on it now. It doesn't matter. You're taxed.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like you were saying there, like you once you start taking it, you have to stay on it,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the downside of that.
Yeah. Knowing again, like dealing in that world that I have, testosterone replacement actually isn't as permanent as people make it out to
Hmm,
be. I think testosterone replacement is more of a if question, or not an if question, but when. And I
makes
think a
sense.
lot of people nowadays could really still push all the way to their 50s before really needing it, unless it's like a fringe case where it's like you either abused PEDs in the past and you just cooked your system, or a brain
Brain injury,
injury,
yeah.
pituitary problems. There's definitely fringe cases, but a lot of it, the more labs I've read, the more I've worked with people, is like a lot of times, a lot of people could get away with to a year of enclomiphene and fix your lifestyle. Because I will be the first person, I will be one of the people to tell you that as someone who's been on TRT now for 7 years, if your lifestyle sucks, if your sleep sucks, if your thyroid health sucks, your gut health sucks, testosterone replacement is not going to magically make you better. It's just putting a band-aid over a bullet hole, a bioidentical band-aid, which is great, but at the end of the day, it's still a band-aid. And it's not going to make your life that much different if you don't fix what caused it in the first place. And a lot of people's issues are their lifestyle, especially with like how like toxic our world is, right? Everything from our shirt, the chemicals in our shirts, the stuff in our food, all of that stuff makes it harder, but it's not impossible. And it definitely just comes back to that lifestyle factor. But I think a lot, like we've talked about, like GLP-1s, and I wish that GLP-1s, because that could have bridged the gap, given me a tool. So you have to look at the tools in the toolbox and be like, okay, for a lot of men, they could use enclomiphene for 6 months to 12 months, bridge that gap, change their lifestyle, come off, and they're going to be able to regain a natural testosterone level, an optimal testosterone level, but you have to keep living the lifestyle. And a lot of people aren't willing to. They just want to put the band-aid over, keep living the lifestyle, but eventually, like it will come to a head and your body's just going to give out in a different department and you're still going to feel like crap.
It's
Yeah.
it's going to adapt some way somewhere. Who knows where that will show up specifically? So, well, with your thyroid, I'm assuming it was a combination again of burning the candle at both ends, trying to be lower calorie, but then also from a probably gut health perspective with the surgery and stuff like that. I'm assuming all those things were playing a role with the thyroid. So like for you, what was, you said you got some replacement. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that. And was there any other changes that you made to get that back on track?
Yeah, so now, like I said, it's been peeling back layers. I've worked with Derek, my coach, for 5 years now. We've accomplished a lot over our time together. There was like a 15-month gap or so in there, took a little break. And as we got paired back up 2 years ago, actually, here in a couple of weeks, we started just peeling back the layers of my GI health. And it's been if that's one thing that I can tell anybody, is if you ever have a GI issue, and depending on how old and how long you've had it, and a lot of times, like you won't know, just given the world that I live in and work in, like I can pinpoint like some possible like points of where it came from. It's been a journey and it's been an exhausting one, like mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially, the investment to regain my GI health. And I think the goal now, like I probably will never come off of TRT. Like I've been on it for 7 years. The thought of trying to walk through the process of coming off of TRT, restoring natural function, if that's even possible at this point after 7 years, there is definitely a feeling of being on testosterone, like that from what I understand from people who I've helped walk off of, there's a difference between your natural 900 and like a 900 on TRT. There's just a difference in how you feel, how you act, how you perform. I'll never probably try to come off of that. But my goal and hope is as I will be running quarterly labs for the rest of the year, deep diving into some specific markers based off of my genetics testing, and as we support some specific nutrients that I'm prone to being deficient in, continue to dial in my nutrition, etc. Like my goal is to potentially come off of thyroid replacement and see if my body can function. I know a lot of people, especially in the bodybuilding world, that have abused thyroid medication and they've come off and they're as long as they're eating enough food, their GI health is in a good place, like your body can just there'll be a lull, but you can bridge the gap and get back to normal. I would like to try that possibly, and if not, so be it. Just continue to dial in my GI health, make sure that I'm processing nutrients and just need the least amount as far as testosterone replacement, need the least amount as far as like thyroid replacement, and just stick to the basics of everything we've learned in as far as MF and MS, optimal circadian rhythm, majority of the time during the year, continue to pack on lean tissue as much as I can and all of that stuff. But I will say, knock on all the wood in the world, like I really do seem to have turned a corner as far as like my overall health and well-being and GI health. Is really seemingly the best that it's ever been. And like my brain function, my energy, my sleep is all the best it's been in as long as I can remember since tracking it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Like you said, the gut's so important. I think people don't realize how important it is and how it can really impact so many different things. That really is the kind of root, if we want to call it root cause, whatever. There are a lot of things I feel like start from there.
100%.
So for you, so now you're sitting around maintenance. Is that kind of what you're planning on doing from a caloric standpoint? Is that where you like, what is that? Obviously, when you're doing your gut health protocol, I would imagine that you weren't eating, maybe you were eating at maintenance. I don't know, but is that kind of where you plan on being is around maintenance? Or do you have to be, since you did a show, do you have to be in a surplus for a little bit? Or, yeah.
Yeah, the goal right now is just I'm stepping into a different season. There was definitely some tossing back and forth of competing. So I get married in 32 days, 32
Nice.
days.
Congrats, man.
Get married in 32 days. I'm 35. I'll be 36 in 2 months. My fiance turns 35 in 2 weeks. And so we're going to start trying. We have our daughter, she's 11. We're going to start trying for one or two more
Sweet.
pretty much right away.
Yeah.
And so there was definitely some ideas being tossed around of like competing next fall or very early in 2027 spring, doing one more show before basically probably taking like a 10-year hiatus from the stage of, hey, I've got young kids to raise. This is not the focus. We're building the businesses and the brands. But I've just set that aside for right now and just realized that like I just do need to step into 2, 3 years of I plan to hike rim to rim next fall,
Cool. That's awesome.
and just really building a massive like aerobic base, really transitioning more away from bodybuilding and transitioning to this is something that I tell a lot of as I've coached and read a lot of like lab panels as I tell a lot of men my age, 35 to mid 40s, hey, you can't train 5 or 6 days a week like you used to in your 20s.
Yeah.
You don't have the bandwidth anymore for that physiologically, mentally, time. And so really practicing what I preach is as I'm stepping into this season of honing back my training to 3 days a week and then becoming a hybrid athlete, like is like really building a massive aerobic base, functioning better. And I think naturally that's going to allow me to one, have a higher maintenance calories, allow me some more food freedom. And number two, it's going to allow me to walk around. Like I really feel my best around 215 to 218 pounds, which on me is that's sharp. Like I'm me at 215, I'm at about 10 to 12% body fat. Like you can see a lot of lines in my legs. Like I'm pretty lean at that weight right now, coming out of the GI protocol and stuff. And just, I had to be, in order to really kick this into gear and get it done, like I had to be pretty much ketogenic. So as we've been stepping into heal and like restore of the GI phase, we've slowly been titrating like different foods, different carbs back in. And so, yeah, the goal is to be at maintenance calories, and we'll see where the buck lands with that. That's going to be pretty variable as I bring cardio up, as my body just adjusts to its new norm. It's new because I had to go very extreme. Like I had H. pylori and some other issues. It ping on my GI map, and I did a 14-day cycle of a triple antibiotic, like to just nuke everything. So we're basically building from the ground up. So it's like restoring everything, healing the lining of my stomach, like all of that stuff. So as we do, it's just going to continue to change. I'd imagine being my size, like my goal is to be right around 222, 225 by wedding. So just simply making sure I'm hitting my step counts, making sure I'm nailing my nutrition. The last handful of weeks have been sitting right about 230, but as long as I keep everything tight for the next 30 days, we shouldn't have an issue pulling off a little 5 to 8 pounds of water and enjoying my wedding, enjoying my honeymoon. And yeah, that's the goal, is maintenance calories. My guess is I'll probably end up landing somewhere around like 3,500 calories. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, that's a solid place to be. I'm sure I'm sure you'd be happy to have that a while back for that to be your maintenance calories and be feeling good because you can do a lot with 3,500 calories, I feel like, especially
Yeah.
if you have a good base. And like you said, man, I'm glad to hear about the cardio. I think that, like you said, I think it's super important. And I feel like for men, like you were hitting on the population too, right? I think cardio is important for everyone, not for burning calories, for actual heart health, cardiovascular fitness. Like you said, building that aerobic base. Like it really does, especially as we get into our 30s and beyond. It's we were talking about what you did earlier, where you were burning the candle at both ends. We still obviously want to watch that, but I definitely feel like building your aerobic base gives you more stress resilience. It builds a bigger buckets where you can handle more, which I think is a good thing, right? But for men specifically, I feel like it's even more important, right? I think from a heart health perspective to make sure that we hit some cardio versus just training weights 5, 6 days a week and maybe doing some steps, right? Getting that in. So I love to hear that, man. Is there anything specific that you're going to track with that or anything like that to make sure that's improving? Or is it just, hey, I'm going to put in the time and I don't know if you're going to look at like your resting heart rate or HRV or testing or anything like that from that
Yeah,
perspective?
it's gonna be all of it. Like it'll all pop up in my lab panels from, okay, how is my body functioning? How am I managing? Like how's my lipids managing? How's my glucose? How's my A1C? That stuff. So that'll be very interesting to see how that goes. It'll be tracking my heart rate variability and looking at how do those things start to trend. How is my HRV? How is my sleep and sleep quality? It was funny, you messaged me originally like about the Dom thing, and I don't know how much you've paid attention to his content recently. Is he shared a couple of stories of like how he wanted to be the biggest guy in the room, and he was a bodybuilder, and he was this, and he was this, and he bought into the narrative of, hey, cardio is this, that, and the other thing. And now he's, hey, I train 3 days a week and I do cardio 3 to 4 days a week. I've built a massive aerobic base, and he's mentally, I'm sharper. I can handle more food. My body in general is more forgiving. I don't have to watch it as closely. I sleep better. He's like, my mental fortitude, stress resilience, my mental sharpness is better. And it's like, that's just, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's like, I would much rather spend the time, build the cardio base than try to take this nootropic and that nootropic. Don't get me wrong, as doing what we do as meatheads,
It's
like
fun.
I spend a lot of money on peptides, a lot of money messing around in this world, and like I'm in the process of opening my own clinics and telehealth business, etc. That is something I'm working on. I love all of that stuff. But it also, that in itself, I don't think people realize, like when you're in it and this is your world, like that gets exhausting sometimes. Like keeping track of the supplements, keeping track of the peptides, like making sure you're not just throwing money down the drain. It gets exhausting. So it's to think that I can just train 3 days a week, work on my aerobic base, and I get all of these net benefits of, hey, my ticker's healthy, my blood work looks really good, my brain functions, like I can wake up at 4 a.m. and I can cook until 5. I can do a 13-hour day and still be present with my family at the end of the day.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, no, and it does all those things. And yeah, and you, like you said, you don't even have to take a nootropic or anything like that. You can just go and train. And yeah, man, I think it's super important. So I love to hear that. I'm glad to hear that's something that you're gonna focus on a bit more. Cool, dude. This was a fun chat, man. I definitely learned a
Yeah.
lot, and I think the audience will take a ton from this. So I guess a couple finishing questions here is anything coming out on your end that you want to let the audience know about, and then where can they find you as well too?
Yeah, you can find me at GQ Fitness with an extra S, TikTok, Instagram. Facebook is just Garrett GQ Query. It's my initials and it's been a nickname for 20 years of my life. This year, I will be popping back up on YouTube and podcasting platforms from a more educational standpoint. And coming in the future is, yeah, me and my very soon to be wife, we are going to be launching a telehealth company in all 50 states. We're going to be launching a brick and mortar, most likely clinic here in Arizona this year, focusing on HRT, but focusing on it from a different perspective of so many of these clinics and stuff like that. And this isn't to talk trash about them by any means, is my goal is to do it a little bit differently as far as like building out all of the resources to go with HRT and education as far as, hey, these are tools. You also need to focus on your strength training. You need, so offering coaching, truly quality coaching alongside of those things to get the most out of it and truly get the health that you're looking for. And realize that these things aren't, whether it be whether you do need testosterone, whether you do need a GLP-1 or you need a healing peptide. Okay, why did you wind up needing this healing peptide in the first place? Like, how did you end up here in helping people in that way, if that's what they want and that's what they're looking for? So just a deeper level in that regard.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, like you said, I think that's super important. Like, why did you end up here and diving into that in more detail? I know that's obviously what you do in your coaching as well, too. Sweet, man. Well, again, really appreciate your time, and we'll have to have you on again in the future, man. And good chat. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep, talk soon. Thanks.